All right, ladies and gentlemen, as you advised before our break, plaintiff has rested. The next step is to afford the defense an opportunity to present testimony, and they have indicated that they do intend on doing that. So, Mr. Doucette, you may call your first witness.
Thank you, Your Honor. The defendant's called Matthew Caldwell, the engineer.
Thank you. You swear or affirm testimony you're about to give here will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. Tom, we also want yourself there.
Hello?
That's good.
Is that too loud? Is that good?
No, you're good.
Okay.
Mr. Doucette, whenever you're ready.
Thank you. Mr. Caldwell, can you please state your full name for the record?
Matthew Robert Caldwell,
And what is your professional address?
855 Todd Avenue, Youngstown, Ohio, 44502.
And are you employed by
Yeah,
someone?
you need to get closer to that microphone if you can.
Excuse me?
Are you employed by some entity?
Rudick Forensic Engineering.
And what is Rudick
Better.
Forensic Engineering?
Engineering consulting firm specializing in forensic engineering, causation analysis of any engineering type of damages and failures.
And who are the members of that firm?
The members, or all the employees,
Well, who are the principals of the firm?
there are 4 owners. It's my father, myself, my brother, and another engineer, Jerry Pollock.
Your father's also an engineer?
Engineer and architect, yes.
And can you tell the jury about your educational background?
I have a bachelor's degree in civil engineering, a master's degree in business administration with a concentration in construction management. The bachelor's in engineering is a 5-year program from the University of Cincinnati. We were on quarters, so every 3 months. The first and last year were full schooling. In the middle 3 years, there was every 3 months you'd go to school, every 3 months you'd work as a paid intern at co-op. All the math and the sciences and the engineering schooling, civil engineering is broke up into 5 disciplines. So it's structural engineering, wastewater, stormwater management, geotechnical engineering, foundation design, transportation engineering, which is the design of pavements and roads and runways, and construction management. So went to school for 5 years. The 5th year, you take what's called the Fundamentals of Engineering exam, which is a 8-hour test. The first 4 hours are all the math and sciences, and then the last 4 hours are specific for engineering and civil engineering. Passed that, graduated, and then after you work for 4 years, you take what's called the Professional Engineering exam. It's similar. It's an 8-hour test. The first 4 hours are general civil engineering, and then the next 4 hours are specific to your field concentration. After I graduated from undergrad, I went straight into grad school for business administration and construction management.
Can you explain to the jury your experience as an engineer?
Starting as a co-op, I worked for the Ohio DOT, working on bridges and roads. Worked on a big bridge in Toledo, which was the first of a kind type bridge.
It's like you're going in and out, so.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Okay.
Get that, are you right up next to that microphone?
Yep. Worked on a bridge in Toledo. After that, worked on some prisons in North Carolina for construction. And then after graduation, did construction.
That was my fault.
Sorry about that.
No, you didn't do that. I'm
Okay.
trying to get the volume right, and I accidentally hit all the way up. I'm sorry about that.
All right. So can you,
Wake everybody up. I was making sure. Late afternoon. All right, I'm sorry.
all right. Mr. Caldwell, you're explaining to the jury about your experience. experience as an engineer in, in, uh, 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 in
to
Okay, so yes, co-op jobs were the Ohio DOT, building a big bridge in Toledo, working on prisons in North Carolina, and then full-time it was laboratories, ground-up construction in Florida. So that involves everything from the foundations, the grading, the stormwater management, the structure, everything involved in building a building. I did 2 labs in the West Palm Beach area in Florida, and then I moved to Orlando, built a very large hotel convention center there, also ground up. So that involves all the foundations, the stormwater management, the grading, the structure itself, and all the interiors, the workings of the building. Then I moved to North Carolina and worked on similar projects where there were data centers, trading floors. And then at that point in 2013, I moved back to Ohio to start in the forensic engineering.
Can you explain to the jury your experience in forensic engineering? If we could just start with a brief explanation of what forensic engineering is, and then your experience insofar as it pertains to issues that we're discussing these days.
Forensic engineering is CSI for buildings. Why? Why did the engineering component fail? Why did it fall down? Why is it leaking? Anything that you can think of any type of engineering failure, it is the causation analysis of why it happened. We get into construction defects. New construction, is it within tolerances? Is it a defect? Why is it or why is it not? Just all the analysis and the inner workings of buildings and why they break or why they fail.
Can you explain to the jury what forensic engineering means when it comes to the interplay between buildings and the grading and the control of stormwater and surface?
Well, a good amount of the work is flooding. Why is the stormwater flowing the way it is? Why is groundwater coming into the building? So it's just an analysis of look at the grading, look at the building, look at everything as a big picture to find out what's causing it, what's the route, how's it getting to where it is, and where should it be going versus what is it doing.
Have you had experience in reviewing site plans and blueprints and drawings of buildings and sites and topographical surveys and things like that?
Yes, I've built $1 billion worth of construction, and every one of them involved site plans and building plans and blueprints.
And can you explain to the jury briefly what a topographical survey is and your familiarity with reading?
Topographical survey is the lay of the land. How is the land sloped? Where are the high spots, the low spots? How is the water going to drain over the land, and where is it going to go?
And in this case, we're going to be reviewing topographical surveys from Polaris and Stroud. Are you familiar with how those surveys are created and how to read the end result of the survey?
Yes.
And how many times have you testified in litigation cases?
I believe this is my 14th testimony.
And in this case, did you have the opportunity to review materials?
Yes.
And to make it clear to the jury, I hired you to be involved in this case, correct?
Correct.
And I asked you to look at some things. What things did you look at in my report?
Everything I was provided for review is in my report. Could I pull that up and do a list?
Sure.
Okay. Want to go my report or the report and the exhibits?
Well, if you look at the exhibit books there, defendant's exhibit book will have your report with your lists and appendices. Exhibit P as in Paul.
The original report that I issued lists everything I was at that time was provided. It included the complaint, a demand letter from the plaintiff, all the document production from the barbers, all the document production from Ms. Crozier, document production from the city of Willoughby, the Polaris engineering surveying topographic map, a report from Ms. Lewin, the engineer that the plaintiff had hired, the Straub surveying topography map. After that, I was provided copies of the deposition transcripts of all three parties, the two defendants and the plaintiff. And then I also reviewed code, historic current codes and industry standards.
And, did you also review basically a catadump of hundreds of thousands of photographs and videos taken by both the parties?
Yes, that was all included in the document production.
And then, did you also then have an opportunity to go to the property and perform a site inspection with your own eyes?
Yes, I inspected the property June 6th, 2023.
And can you just tell the jury in a general way what it was that you inspected while you were there?
Would you just keep your voice up too, please?
Thank you, Judge.
Go ahead.
Can you tell the jury what you inspected when you visited the properties?
I inspected the Barber property. I inspected their land, the side yard, the north yard, which is the north side yard, their backyard, the property line between the Barber property and Crozier property. I inspected their patio, everything in the general vicinity of the Barber property, the adjacent neighbors' properties. And then on the Crozier property, inspected the driveway, inspected her backyard, her side yards, and the detached garage.
And you had, at the time, the benefit of the Polaris survey that Ms. Crozier had provided, or her lawyer had provided?
Correct.
Okay, and now we have the benefit of the Straub surveys. Can you explain to the jury, first, did you work with Mr. Straub in defining the scope of what the surveys would be?
Yes.
And why was it that you wanted the scope of Mr. Straub's survey, even though there was already some surveying done by Polaris?
The Polaris survey was very narrowed. It showed a very narrow area of the property line between Barbers and Croziers. I wanted to see a big picture. What is the slope of and the contour of the land for the different neighbors to the south, the east, the north, and the west? How is everything flowing in general, not just looking at the isolated area on the property line?
And then, as long as you have that exhibit book there in front of you, this is the defendant's exhibit to it, and there is a list there in front of the book, and then there's individual exhibit page 2. Can you just confirm to the jury whether or not you had an opportunity to review the exhibits that are in this book that are also part of this case?
Exhibit A is pictures of the north garage exterior. I took all those pictures. Exhibit B is the north garage interior. I believe I took all of these pictures. Exhibit C, the driveway pad. Majority I took on my June 6th inspection. There were some dated in January. I would not have taken those, but I have reviewed them. Exhibit D, the garage pad, I have reviewed and took the majority of these, if not all of them. Exhibit F, garage south wall, I have reviewed, took the majority of these. There were some others that I did not take, but I have reviewed. Exhibit G, Crozier gutter. I did not take any of these, but I have reviewed the pictures. Exhibit A are the surveys. I have reviewed those.
Excuse me, do you mean Exhibit H?
Exhibit H, yes.
Thank you. I may have misheard.
Okay. Exhibit I, the patio picture. I've reviewed these and took them as well, some of them. Exhibit J, the Barber gutters. I've reviewed them and took the majority of them or all of them. Exhibit K is the proposed swale and some pictures. I've reviewed all of these. Exhibit L. I don't believe I've seen these videos of the property line and garage cans. Exhibit M, Barber garage pictures. I've reviewed those. Exhibit N, the building department file. I've reviewed that. Exhibit O, auditor the records. I've reviewed that for the Crozier Garage. Exhibit P is my report. I've reviewed that. Exhibit Q is weather records. I've skimmed through those.
Okay, thank you. And then specifically then, within the exhibit K, K1 is the proposed swale area, the Lewin conceptual drawing or design, you reviewed that.
Yes.
And then exhibit K2 is Ms. Lewin's conceptual drawing with your red cross-section of the horizontal view of the cross-section of that swale. Did you create that red cross-section that's on that?
Yes.
Okay. And then there are some other exhibits, K3 and 3.1, where you laid the Lewin swale with the Stroud topography in order to orient yourself as you went through your analysis. Is that correct?
Can you repeat that?
So exhibit K 3.1
3.1.
and K3, it's the proposed swale area where we have the Gale Lewin swale overlaid on the Stroud topography in order to orient your analysis of where the swale is. And did you do that?
Yes, I did the overlay.
Okay. And then exhibits K5 and K6, you created those cross sections. Those are the red
Yes.
cross sections. So, okay. All right. And, based upon your education, your experience, all the materials you reviewed, and your visit to the property, your site inspection of the property itself, do you have an opinion to a reasonable degree of engineering probability as to whether or not the Barber's use of their property is reasonable or unreasonable?
I do have an opinion.
So what is your opinion?
It's reasonable.
And specifically, with regard to the patio area, can you explain to the jury why the way the patio exists as it sits today and the way it's constructed and some of its features, why that is something you consider to be reasonable in this residential setting?
The patio sloped to the east between almost 2% to about 3%. That's a code requirement. When you have an impervious surface, the slope has to it has to slope 2% away from the building foundation system. So they could not slope their patio towards their own house. It's a code violation. They sloped it to the east. You don't want to slope it to the south because the whole grading and the whole topography slopes from the south to the north to Lake Erie. You didn't want to slope it to the south because then it's just going to drain right back to where it came from. You don't want to slope it to the north because that's sloping it towards the property line. So they sloped it to the rear, to the east, and then along the border of the eastern and the northern border of the patio, they have stone pavers, real stones, and then below that is a trenched gravel pit, just a hole they dug, a trench they dug and filled with gravel. So as the water slopes down the patio, it drains into that trenched gravel, and then it just equally distributes and disperses into the soil. Therefore, it's not shedding directly into anybody's property. It's just equally distributing into the ground.
And then in terms of the landscape beds that we see in the photographs and based upon your inspection, the landscape beds are somewhat raised beds with evergreens and some flowering plants and some mulching and an edge distinguishing the turf from the landscaping beds. Can you explain to the jury why it is that your opinion that the landscaping area of the yard is a reasonable use of the property's residential setting?
The Barber's landscaping beds provide slope towards the street. So their landscaping beds are kind of curved towards the northeast, just to divert water from the landscaping beds to their grass and towards the streets. The edging is aesthetics. You don't want the grass growing into the landscaping beds, and the mulch is is useful. You want to have mulch because, one, when it's not saturated, it helps to retain and soak up moisture, and the mulch protects the root system of the plants. You want the plants to be planted in soil, and if you use mulch, or sometimes you can use a landscaping rock, it retains the moisture so that your plants always have moisture and they don't dry out and they don't die. So using mulch is a normal, typical means and methods of how you plant landscaping beds. There's nothing, it's completely reasonable.
And then as we travel along from there out towards the side yard, eventually the street, can you describe why the farmer's use of their property is a reasonable use in this residential zone?
From which corner to which corner?
So as we've gone from the patio to the back landscaping beds, and then as you described, it steers out towards the street. And so as we walk out, what I'm envisioning next is this: there's a few directions we could go. I want to go as we walk out, and we're looking at this Crozier's driveway pad, but we turn to our left and look down towards the street, that side yard area now, the barbers. Can you explain to the jury why it is that you're continuing that change in use?
You had a low gradual slope to the street. There's videos out there that it was raining and there were some pieces of grass that were picked and put in the water and they drained to the street. So everything getting from the Crozier's backyard to the side yard is eventually making it to the street.
And based upon everything that you have, based on your education, your experience, all of the materials that you reviewed, and your inspection yourself of the conditions at the properties, do you have an opinion to a reasonable degree of engineering probabilities as to whether the damages that are alleged by Ms. Crozier, either to the driveway pad or to the garage, are caused by the water from the barber's property?
I do have an opinion.
What is your opinion?
They're not caused by anything from the Barber property.
And as it pertains to the items I mentioned, can you explain to the jury why you have that opinion?
So when you enter the garage on the north side, so this is the side opposite the Barber property, the majority of the sill plate, which is the piece of wood that the vertical wall framing pieces sit on, and the majority of the bottom sections of those 2x4 studs were completely rotted out. Some of them are so rotted out that bricks, full bricks, had been placed where the sill plate had once been, and the studs were bearing on those. Those have been there since the 2002 purchase of the property. That means that sill plate and the bottom ends of those framing members were so rotted out, they were completely gone, completely disintegrated, that those bricks were put right underneath there. None of that was caused from any water drainage from the Barber property. When you look at the slab inside of the garage, it had a crown. It was humped. So the middle was humped. It has a very, very small hump. You can't see it with your own eye, but when you put a level on it, from about the middle of the garage to the south towards the Barber property, it sloped about 1/2 inch and 5 feet. That same slope existed on the north side. So any water that could have been coming from the north side, from the south side, cannot get to the north side. That tells you that all the rot, and there was significant rust too. There was a piece of conduit that was stubbed up through the garage slab that was so rusted it was just completely sheared off. That's taken decades of moisture to cause. The completely disintegrated and rotted sill plate and the wall framing, that's taken decades to form. There are two reasons why that happened. One, the whole foundation system was below grade. The top of the footings were below grade, the sill plate was below grade, and that means the bottom areas of the wood framing were below grade. That's a complete violation of any current and past building code or industry standard. You can't have wood exposed to dirt. Even if it's pressure treated, it's going to eventually rot out. Two, again, current historic building codes and industry standards require you to have positive slope of the yard away from the foundation system. It's actually, the requirement is 6 inches of fall in the first 10 feet. So in theory, if you don't have anything else, if there's no downspouts, no gutter system, and the roof is just allowing rainwater to fall off the roof and hit the ground right by that foundation system, if you have the proper slope, that water just drains straight away. But if you have negative slope, it goes back towards the structure. It can get damaged basement structures. It can get into, in this case, the foundation system, and it just completely rotted out the sill plate and the framing, and it rusted out the conduit, and it rusted out the bottom of the garage door track. All that moisture damage has taken decades to form.
And that was a description of the north wall.
That's the north wall.
How does that relate to your analysis of the south?
The south wall is in similar condition. The south wall, that sill plate was completely gone. Similar, you had areas that were just completely turned into mulch. I mean, there was no sill plate left. The bottom of those studs, there was nothing left. I have a picture that I think might have been in the exhibits. I have a little 6-inch torpedo level. I completely stuck that level underneath where that framing member should have been going down to the footing. There was nothing there. It was completely rotted out. At the rear corner, the southeast corner, the downspout, the gutter had not been capped. So for years, all that roof runoff was draining into the gutter and just discharging at that southeast corner, hitting the ground and getting right into the garage. Her own property sloped towards her garage. The north side is not every part of the north side sloped, but the general vicinity of the ground right in front of the garage sloped back. The south side, she had the first 3'3" to 3'6" of the yard adjacent to that south wall was her property, and it sloped right back into her garage, completely violating all building codes and industry standards. So just a combination of the inadequate grading and the improper placement of the foundation system below grade had resulted in all the damages. It has nothing to do with the Barber property.
Okay. And can you help the jury understand your assessment of the driveway pad and the driveway in the section that leads from the garage up above the house?
That section, from my knowledge, was original or was one of the first part of the driveway. When the Barbers built the property, there was no driveway at the front of the now Crozier property. That was all gravel. The back did have a driveway that led to the garage. That had the same similar slope and crown as the slab did in the garage. So when I took my 5-foot level, the south side sloped about 1/2 inch and 5 feet towards the south, and the north sloped about 1/2 inch and 5 feet towards the north. So you did have the garage and the slab in front of it, the driveway did have slope, crowned, but it still drained. So you can see some pictures and videos of water ponding at the northwest corner of the garage, and it gets into that control joint between the driveway slab and the garage slab, and then it just drains straight south towards the Barber property, collects at the southwest corner, and then it drains to the street. So, and she has a little eyebrow roof above her garage, on the front of her garage, that has no gutters. So all that roof runoff is just draining directly onto the garage slab and draining to the north, to the south. And you can even see there's a line. There's an erosion line of where the water has slowly started to erode that concrete. That's taken decades to erode concrete with that water dripping there. So there's all the water from the garage is getting to the two corners and then draining to the street. There were some areas of displacement. The displacement that I saw was between the original section of the concrete driveway and the new section. They were poured about possibly 15 years after we know the Barber house was built. The Barber house was built in '85, and it's been reported that the prior owner installed that driveway in the late 90s. Call it 99, that's 14 years. So you have 14 years difference from an original concrete slab and a new concrete slab. You have different base materials, different compaction had been done. So just the combination of the different base, the different compaction. This is Northeast Ohio. It's 16 degrees out right now. What does water do when it freezes? It expands. It's the only material that expands when it freezes. Everything else shrinks. So that's called heave. So when you get the wintertime frost heave, all the water underneath there expands and it raises up driveways, concrete. So if it gets too cold, it can actually raise up your foundation system. That's why buildings and building codes require a minimum depth of frost. So just based on normal and typical settlement and frost heave, you got that typical differential displacement between the sections of the driveway from normal and typical heave and settlement. It's nothing to do with any stormwater runoff coming from the Barber property.
Let's talk about the swale and the concept of the swale. You've seen it here in two places. You've seen the concept of the swale scribbled on a 1986 note from an engineer in the city on an early site plan. And you've seen the conceptual drawing of the swale by Ms. Lewin, authored in this case by her. And based upon your education and your experience, and I guess you've got some licensures too, don't you? Are you licensed in any states?
I'm licensed in 7 states as an engineer.
Which states? I'm going to test your memory.
Florida, North Carolina, Ohio, Michigan, Pennsylvania, West Virginia, and New York.
Based upon your education, your experience, your licensure, your review of all these materials, your inspection of the properties, and particularly your review of the Ms. Lewin's conceptual design for a swale, do you have an opinion to a reasonable degree of professional engineering probability as to whether or not the conceptual design for a swale in this particular residential setting is reasonable or unreasonable?
I do have an opinion.
And what is your opinion?
It's unreasonable. A swale is not feasible for this environment, for this condition.
Can you please explain to the jury why you wrote that?
You've seen the cut sheets and the drawings. A swale is a ditch. It forms a V. You have 2 slope sides, and with the degree of the slope and the elevation drop from the Crozier side to the bottom of the swale, the Barber side to the bottom of the swale, you get an angle. And that angle is between 63 and 42 or 43%. I mean, 45% is you're looking at that. This is a 45-degree angle, so 43 might be here, and 60 is going to be right here. We know that that side yard is a walkway. We've seen pictures of people parking on the Crozier driveway. They actually park on the grass. So if you're on the passenger side, you open that door, you're getting out, you're stepping, you're transversing over that walkway. So now you're stepping out on a slope that's like this. You're going to twist your ankle, you're going to fall down. It is a known hazard of what that slope's going to be, and it's going to cause a tripping hazard. If that swale's put in, someone's going to fall down that swale. We'll be right back in this courtroom when someone's suing somebody because they fell down the swale. Nobody wants that. On the Barber side, I think they had 60%. Again, they're going to be walking around their yard all the time. They're going to fall down that steep slope. It's an unreasonable slope.
Okay, so that's the shape of it, and you explain to the jury your assessment of how the swale would function were this conceptual swale and this needs to be installed, how it would function related to management of stormwater, and how that influences your opinion on the unreasonableness of the design.
So the design of the swale that's been proposed runs from about the southwest corner of the garage to kind of the right adjacent to the porch of the barbers. And it's going to be a retention basin. It's going to be a pit that they're going to dig, and the water is, in theory, going to flow down to a new drain that they're going to install. And then that new drain is tied into the existing drain adjacent to the front porch of the barber house. Well, that drain at the barber house, it's not tied to another foundation system. It's just an open discharge. So even though there's a drain, it goes down a couple feet, and then it just dumps into the gravel backfill at their basement wall, trickles down into their foundation system. As of right now, the as-built condition of the yard, there's minimal. You are getting some drainage down that drain. It's from the downspout at the front porch, but the majority of the surface water that's flowing along that property line is going to the street. The design of this swale is dumping everything into that existing drain. They're going to flood out the basement. The basement's going to flood. All that discharge is going to run down and wash out the backfill of the basement wall. It's going to wash out the bearing backfill of the footing, the concrete footing that the structure bears on. Once that starts to wash out, if this is the gravel, if this is the base, and this is the footing, as that washes out, there's nothing there. The footing is going to end up to rotate and to settle, and you're going to have major structural issues. We can't allow that to happen. Second, I think you've seen the pictures in the fall time of all the leaves that accumulate and lay in that side yard. That's a maintenance issue. Those leaves are going to clog the drain. Once that drain's clogged, it's going to be a retention basin. There's going to be a mini pond in that side yard. Nobody wants a pond in their side yard. Now you can't walk through it. Now the people parking in the Crozier driveway are not only going to step up and slide down that steep hill, they're going to step in a pond. It's just there's one, the slope of the sides, the side slopes are not feasible. The discharge to the existing drain is not feasible. And having any foliage or leaves falling and covering the proposed drain is not feasible.
Now I want you to assume, for purposes of this question, that Ms. Lewin has testified in this case that she has since reconsidered her thought about the connection to the barber's existing drain in an effort to either reduce the amount of water that makes it to that drain or possibly even eliminate the connection to the drain altogether. There is a conceptual idea, although not in anything that I can hand you on paper, of underneath this swale system, digging down deeper first and refilling that area with some kind of a gravel or some substance like that, with a weed fabric over that, and then put the topsoil on to the swale, such that from the street, the swale would still look the same. But underneath the surface of the slopes that you've described here, there would be this gravel system running the length of the house. Based upon your education, your experience, your licensure, your review of all these materials, your inspection of the property, your consideration of this assumption I just asked you to assume, do you have an opinion to a reasonable degree of professional engineering probability as to whether or not, even with that modification, this conceptual swale design would be reasonable or unreasonable?
It would be unreasonable.
And why are you of that opinion?
One, you still have the side slopes. That's a hazard, a walking hazard. And two, the thought, the idea of digging this pit below the swale is called a dry sump. So a lot of times, if you don't have a connection to utility sewers, there's even some local jurisdictions don't allow you to discharge to the street. There's options for a dry sump. So you dig in its calculations. You have to do all the calculations based on all the runoff that's going to this dry sump. And it's just a big pit. It's a massive pit. It could be 10 feet by 10 feet by 5 feet deep. It could be 20 feet by 15 by 10 feet deep. And it's filled with big rock. So the concept is the drainage goes into this pit, and then all the voids in the rock are open space. The water fills up, but there's still no drainage. It's not going to evaporate because it's below grade. It's not getting hit by the sun. It just, you wait for the soil not to be saturated, and then it just discharges out the sides. But in this case, discharging out the sides is going to be discharging against the barber basement wall and getting into the basement, or it's going to be discharging underneath the Crozier driveway and causing settlement or additional heave. And once it's fully saturated, it's still going to full up. You're still going to have a retention basin. It's still going to be a pond in the side yard.
Okay, thank you. I don't have any other questions. I just want to thank you for your work on this case and from down here today and explaining these things.
You're welcome.
Mr. Grauer.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Mr. Caldwell.
Good afternoon.
We've never met. I represent Kathleen Crozier, the plaintiff in the case. Let's start with a couple of introductory questions. So you had already testified about your general education background and employment background. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. So in relation to your current role, can you walk me through a day-to-day for you?
Every day is different.
Okay.
It depends on the type of loss or case that we're involved in.
Okay. So you reference a case or a loss. Do all the projects you currently work on relate to some type of accidental loss, something along those lines?
Any type of engineering related failure or construction defect.
Okay. Okay. So when it comes to the type of loss, it's not restricted to accidental. It can be something intentional?
Yes.
Okay. Let's talk about, because you left off on the swale, let's talk a little bit about that. So in this role that you currently have, would you call it mostly investigatory, meaning you investigate and then report? Is that how it works?
Yes, for the most part.
So I'm just really trying to understand specifically what you do. So outside of that, do you have occasion, because you said your job does vary from day to day, do you have occasion to, in your current role, go out and design solutions like the one you criticized from Galedor?
If we're asked to, we can provide repair recommendations, yes.
Can you give me an example of the most recent swale design for residential construction and its application that you've done?
I've looked at a lot of different flooding, surface flooding. I can't pinpoint the last swale design.
Okay. As to the actual design of the swale itself, how often do you use a program that creates is it CAD? Is that what you guys use? CAD?
Yes, CAD is a computer automated design program.
Okay. When is the last time you pulled out the CAD program, plugged the information into it, and created a swale design like the one you criticized of Galedor?
Everything I do is by hand. I don't do CAD.
Okay. So you can't remember the last time you've designed a swale for a residential application, and it's true that you can't remember the last time you opened CAD to do anything of that sort. Is that fair?
The last time I opened CAD was probably pre-2005.
Okay. What did you use to create that diagram that had the red slopes going the different directions on the two sides, Crozier property coming in and Barber property coming in?
Well, the slopes are simple math.
Right.
You read the survey. You know what the top elevations are, the bottom elevations are. Rise over run is the slope, and I PDF'd it.
Okay. I want to understand your testimony completely clearly. So, is it your testimony that any swale design at all within the confines of the side yard of the Barbers is possible or not possible? Any design
Test
at
it one
all
more time,
of the swale?
please. Re-ask that question.
Sure. Whichever question I'm going to re-ask you. Okay. In your mind, having looked at all that you've looked at, as you sit here today, can you conceive of a swale that functions in that space at all?
You don't need a swale.
Okay. Notwithstanding what you just said, need aside, could one be built that functions in that space?
You could, but you don't need a swale.
Okay. Would it surprise you to hear?
But then you have to realize when you do the swale,
Hang on, sir. Let me ask the next question, please.
Would it? You weren't here for this. Would it surprise you to hear that Mr. Barber testified he believes that a swale already exists in that area? Would it surprise you?
there was one, there was a, before the driveway was poured, the Crozier driveway, there were railroad ties. So the railroad ties, between the railroad ties and the slope of the Barber property, there was a swale.
He testified today he believes one exists today. Do you agree or disagree with that?
The contour of the land provides the path for water to flow. So it would be a swale. It would be the contour of the whole area of the property line. Everything drains to the street.
Okay. So we've got, from your testimony, a swale is conceivably possible to be placed in that area. That's fair. A function aside, or purpose aside, it's conceivably possible, right?
You'd have to look at the beginning point, the end point, what's it draining to, what's it discharging to. You'd have to do a full review.
Okay. And then we have testimony I just referred you to that one currently, Mr. Barber believes one currently exists based on the contours of the land, right?
That's what you said.
Okay. So meshing those two together, have you ever come up with an alternative design to that which you've criticized of Gail Lewin to help the concept or help with the concept of the existing swale that Mr. Barber believes is there, or to better it?
No, because it's not needed.
Okay. Okay. So it's not needed at all, but it's already there, so it doesn't need to get better?
You don't need to modify it.
Okay.
You don't need to add anything to that side yard.
Okay. Let's, hold on a second. You also criticized, we'll stay on the swale for a moment, you also criticized we'll call it the reconfigured concept where there was a greater depth, where there'd be gravel and then some material in between and then topsoil and then basically the same dimensions of the swale that you saw on Gail Lewin's diagram, right? You said that was unreasonable, right?
One, the side slopes are unreasonable. It's a fall hazard. And then two, you're putting in a dry sump below it.
A what?
A dry sump. So that water has to, there's no pipe connection. That water has to go somewhere, and the way dry sumps are designed is they dissipate. They dissipate into the adjacent soil. So if you dig this huge pit, where's the water going to go? It's going to go underneath the driveway, and it's going to go towards the basement wall, causing moisture damage to both of them. Because you're putting extra water, this huge volume of water underground with no drainage. It's just seepage. It's seeping out the sides.
So you take issue with two things: the slopes based on walkability. Is that fair?
Yes.
Okay. And you take issue with water penetrating into the ground at that particular depth and its effect. Is that fair?
Correct. How is it going to drain, and what's the drainage going to do? It's going to damage the adjacent structures.
Okay. So when you say damage adjacent structures, there is currently a drain that discharges that collects water from that area intentionally, that discharges it against the Barber's foundation, correct?
Correct, but that drain is not collecting every piece of runoff. That drain is collecting the downspout and minimal areas of the surrounding soil. when you look at the contour and you look at the topographic, the majority of the stormwater runoff going from the back to the front goes to the street. Everything doesn't go to that drain.
Okay.
Now you're putting all this moisture and hydrostatic pressure. Hydrostatic pressure is the weight of water. And you're putting all the hydrostatic pressure, because now you just intentionally put all this water down there against the basement wall. It wasn't going to be designed to withstand all this hydrostatic pressure.
So, right now, you have a drain that collects, we'll say some water. Not necessarily all water, but some water.
Correct.
And it drains it against the Barber's foundation currently, right?
Correct.
This swale that we're talking about, would you agree with me, it would collect the water that would otherwise go into that drain? Meaning the second, we'll call it the second iteration of the conceptual design you and I just talked about. It would collect the water that would otherwise go into that location, correct?
Correct.
Okay, so why is that concept that keeps the water away from the Barber's property any worse than the current situation where water is literally draining directly against their foundation?
Because the water, the current as-built condition, you have limited water. Limited water going into that drain that's draining to the foundation system. Now you're going to provide a full swale the entire length of their basement wall that's going to saturate the soil, because that's what the whole purpose of a dry sump is, to collect the water and to discharge it to the adjacent soil. Now you're purposely saturating all that soil, which is going to migrate against the basement wall, potentially get through the basement wall, and you're getting all that hydrostatic pressure, which is force pushed against the basement wall.
Do you have an opinion on how the Crozier driveway itself drains water when it hits, let's say water hits the centermost point of all directions of the Crozier driveway. Do you have any opinion as you sit here today on where the water goes from there?
I'd have to look at the topo survey to see exactly what point you're talking about and the direction of flow.
Okay. So if there were to be, let me ask you a different question then. If there were to be heavy rain and the heavy rain hits her driveway, where would you expect it to go from there if it were a sheet, it just was a sheet rain? Where would you expect that to go?
Well, eventually goes to the street. Like I talked about before, some parts in general, it slopes to the street, high to low to the street. But there is a small crown, so some areas do slope to the north, some areas slope to the south. And then once it gets to the south, everything drains to the street.
You had made mention that, well, let me take you to an exhibit first. I'm going to go to Plaintiff's Exhibit 19B.
Is that this book?
Oh no,
Right here.
We're off the books.
You're gonna
We're
get
on
it there.
So, okay. So, I believe you had testified earlier that the slope of the patio slopes to the rear of the Barber property, correct?
Correct.
Okay. And I think you testified also that the landscaping beds slope to the street. Is that right?
Correct.
Okay. So, given those two sort of competing directions of where water is draining, where does the, like if it rains, where does the water go from there? Meaning there's water coming from the patio off the patio to the rear, water coming and hitting the flower beds and going towards the street. Where does the water go from there?
I don't follow your question.
Okay. I gotta bring up a diagram. So actually, maybe this video will be helpful. So I'm playing Plaintiff's Exhibit 19B. So those flower beds in the back, I represent to you, this video has been previously identified as video of the barber's flower beds in the back. Okay? So my question to you is, you're talking about water draining from the flower beds to the street. You're also talking about water draining off the back patio, effectively towards the flower beds, right?
The drainage on the patio collects in the trench gravel drain, and then it's distributed all around the perimeter of the patio.
So it's your testimony today that zero water gets from the patio to that edged out area right there where the water is collected in the middle of the video.
No, it's equally dispersed. It gets into the trench gravel drain, and then it's dispersed into the soil. And then it drains from there.
Okay, so it gets...
It's not a direct discharge.
Not a direct discharge. Mm-hmm. Okay. So it's draining towards the back. You're saying it's not a direct discharge. Ultimately, I'm going to use a word other council have used. When it's fully saturated, right? When the ground is fully saturated, where does that water go, subsurface or on the surface, when it leaves the barber patio?
When it's fully saturated, it flows to the north and to the east, just like every other property in the area. Everything slopes to Lake Erie. And in this area, it slopes from the south to the north, and it slopes from the west to the east. So in fully saturated sheet flow, it's going north and it's going west, I'm sorry.
So let me get this straight. You're saying that if the ground is fully saturated, runoff, notwithstanding the grading, whatever the grading is, right? Runoff would go to the north. Is that right?
In general, it flows that way. At this area, it's eventually going west to the street.
West to the street. So as we look at the path of the water in this video, are you saying that ultimately the water in this video is getting to the street?
Ultimately, yes. And you also have to realize the first 3'3" to 3'6" of what you're showing there is not the Barber property. That's Crozier's property. Mm-hmm. She needs to have slope away from her property for drainage.
Let's talk about that for a minute. So I believe you had said, and I want to make sure I'll get off of this exhibit. I want to make sure I have this right. So you had testified earlier that current code and past code, if you apply current code or past code to the Crozier garage, the elevations of the ground surrounding it that meet it and how it is situated would violate that, correct?
And industry standard, correct.
Okay. Isn't it true that there's absolutely no way to know what the grading was around the Crozier garage around the time it was built?
Look at the concrete driveway. It's flush with the ground. You're not going to have a concrete driveway sticking up above the ground as a trip hazard. When you pour exterior concrete, sidewalks, driveways, you name it, sure, the top is flush with the ground. So, and right now, the driveway has the same contour, the same slope as the slab. So they're at the same level. So the fact that if grading had been changed, you would have the grading flowing onto or above the driveway, and that doesn't exist. It's level with it, and then it does the gradual slope. So everything that I've seen, everything that I've looked at is, there has not been massive grading projects that's brought in grade after it was built. This garage was built below grade, and that's the whole 89 years it's been in existence, and that's the whole reason why that sill plate is rotted out. It's below grade.
And you're basing that on the driveway, how the driveway is situated.
How the driveway is level with the interior slab.
Okay. You and I both agree that driveway is not from 1935, right? I mean, it's not cracked anywhere.
It's in the same condition as the slab inside the garage.
So it's
And you have control joints. It's not you have one large piece of concrete. It's broken up into control joints, which limits cracking. Shrinkage cracking, you can control shrinkage cracking, and you do that by control joints.
So it's your testimony today, you are certain that that driveway is from 1935, and that is the basis for your conclusion that it was that the garage, the grading around the garage, was completely wrong from day one.
I don't know how old the driveway is. I'm telling you the slab is the same level, the same profile as the driveway. That slab is original. So the fact that the slab was there and the garage driveway is the same profile, same elevation, and there's not dirt falling onto that driveway, I don't see any ways that there was this massive or any grading projects done to bring grade and fill it around the garage.
That being said, that conclusion is based on the assumption that the driveway tells you that. The driveway is what gives you that conclusion.
Everything tells me that. The design of the interior slab and the driveway, the siding is crushed because it's sunken because the sill plates are so rotted out.
What would you expect to see from sill plates in a garage from 1935 as opposed to what you're seeing? What would you expect to see?
If the sill plates were above grade, if they had a proper foundation that extended above grade 6 inches, they wouldn't be rotted out.
So, all of that being said, as far as the garage is constructed, to your knowledge, is there any requirement on a homeowner when they purchase their property to bring the garage up to current code, which is what you're telling me has to be a certain elevation? Is there a requirement that Kathleen Crozier needed to do that?
There's once she bought it, there's the Willoughby Property Maintenance Code, which tells you you can't allow decay. And then you can have the International Property Maintenance Code, which is an industry standard, which tells you have to have the proper grading away from a structure to prevent water and decay. So buying it, no, there were no requirements that when she bought it, she had to do something. But now that she's the owner, yes, she needs to properly maintain that property.
Okay, so what you're saying, where are these Willoughby maintenance? Are you talking about the Willoughby Municipal Code? Is that what you're getting?
No, the property maintenance code.
Property maintenance schedule.
Mm-hmm.
In terms of the property maintenance schedule, who, to your knowledge, enforces that?
Usually it's zoning or the building department.
Okay. Do you know that the building department has been out at the Barber's property and the Crozier property multiple times in the last 2 years during this litigation about Ms. Crozier's garage and never cited her about that?
Okay.
Isn't it?
It's a codified ordinance, the property maintenance code.
Isn't it true that her garage is what they say grandfathered in because of its age, such that these requirements that you're talking about that have to stick to every property don't because of its age?
You could be grandfathered in, but that doesn't mean you're not going to get damage. If her garage had been built with a proper foundation above grade, and if her grading had been provided the positive slope, these damages would not exist. The root cause, the only cause of these damages are the below grade condition of her foundation system and the negative slope around her property, on her property that drains into it. You address those two, and the issues go away.
I'm going to play this video one more time. Sorry, I'm getting a little repetitive, but so that was 19B. I'm going to go to I'm going to play Exhibit 27A for a moment here. Mr. Caldwell, I stopped the video. You have presented at least two different alternative reasons as opposed to what my client is claiming relative to why the garage, you say, is damaged. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay. Which of those is the reason? Which of those is the reason? Is it all of them? One of them, or what is it?
It's the combination, the below grade fact and the grading fact.
Right. But at no time have you ever believed that water coming from the Barber property could also be one of those causes that you would say are multiple causes.
Correct.
Okay. So you've cited multiple alternative causes, but there is no possible way at all that the water coming from the Barber's property that you're seeing in the last two videos I showed you contributed at all.
If she had the proper slope on her property, the water wouldn't be getting to the garage.
Not my question. So my question is there no possible way the water from the Barber property is contributing to the damage to the garage?
If she had the proper slope, none of this would happen.
Still not my question. Is there no way that the water coming from the Barber property is causing damage to her property?
Correct.
Damage to the garage?
There's no way, because the same thing's happening on the north side. The north side has the same rot, the same deterioration, the same rust. It's not adjacent to the Barber property. The north side is similar to the south side. The Barber property has nothing to do with it. It is the below grade condition of the property, and it is the slope and improper slope of the Crozier property. The proof's in the pudding. There's no damages on the east wall because it's above grade. The east sill plate is not rotted out because it is above grade. There are 2 or 3 courses of brick that sill plate sits on. It's not above grade. The 2 below grade areas are the north and the south, and they're all rotted. Water from the south is not getting to the north, and the water from the north is not getting to the south.
Okay. So you had mentioned a couple things I want to touch on. I think we're you had mentioned sort of in passing this rusted conduit. Do you remember where that was located inside the Crozier garage?
Rusted conduit is northwest corner.
Okay. About how many feet from the door of the garage was it?
A couple feet, I don't remember.
Okay. So you'd agree with me it's within a couple of feet?
Correct.
Right? You
It's
said
adjacent to the northeast corner,
Okay.
northwest corner.
And you were using that as an example for likely, we'll say, water intrusion coming in from that side as opposed to the south side?
Correct.
Okay. Based on its location, isn't it just as likely that its exposure to the elements based on its location being so close to the door caused rusting all the way up there? Meaning rusting to that same conduit?
Water coming from where?
Well, when you look at the garage, it being two feet away from the door, and the door being open to the elements at least on occasion, one would presume.
No, because there's no water coming in from the open end of the garage. Your own expert even says that. Your own expert even says there's no water coming from the east side. It's all coming from the south side.
So our own expert actually said the opposite, but we'll leave it there. So as we sit here today, taking everything into account, and based on your experience relative to looking at the Barber property and looking at the Crozier property, you're saying there is no way that one of the causes of the deterioration we're looking at is the Barber's runoff.
Correct.
Okay. No further questions.
Mr. Lucas, security and clear.
No questions, Your Honor. Thank you.
Redirect examination, Mr. Doucette.
No, but thank you, Matt, for coming down and taking the time to explain this.
All right, sir.
You're welcome.
Thank you very much. You are excused this time.
Thank you.
You got what you brought?
I was just putting them back.
Okay. Thanks, sir. Mr. Doucette, you may call your next witness.
Judge, the defense has called their last witness with Mr. Caldwell. We've already heard from both of my
Very well.
clients. I don't feel the need to put them up. So.
No
Yeah,
further
no
witnesses?
further
All right,
witnesses,
that's all I
sir.
need to hear. Any rebuttal witnesses?
No, Your Honor.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, as you just heard, the defense has rested. That means they have presented all the evidence they intend on presenting in this case. The plaintiff does not have any rebuttal testimony, so you have now heard all the evidence that each side intends on presenting. There are two steps that remain to be completed before you get to begin your deliberation. The next step is each side is going to make what we call closing arguments, and then the court will provide you with the final instructions of law. Now, before we get to the closing arguments, there are legal matters I need to address with the attorneys outside the presence of the lawyers. In addition, closing arguments will take a little bit of time. By the time we'd be ready to get to them, we wouldn't have enough time to finish them. So what we're going to do is I'm going to excuse you for the day. You'll stick around here. We'll get everything in order that we need to address so that first thing tomorrow morning, we can start right up with the closing arguments and get right in here. So I'm going to excuse you today at this point in time. Now, we're going to start an hour later tomorrow. It's going to be 9:30 that we're going to start. Fortunately, we have our annual judges meeting. We literally have one time a year, and it's tomorrow. So I need to attend that. I'm going to leave early if I have to, but I have to attend that, and it's once a year. So we're going to start at 9:30 tomorrow. We'll start right at 9:30. Go right into the closing arguments. Please remember, don't talk about this case with anyone, even though all the evidence has been presented. You're still not allowed to talk about it. Please don't do that. Don't let anyone talk about it with you or in your presence. Researching, investigating any issues involved with this. So enjoy your evening tonight. We'll get back to you tomorrow.
All rise.
Why don't we take 5 minutes and then we'll reconvene in here.